Okay, so let's set aside the BS for a second. That's what we're talking about, Tyrese Maxey, right? Like, that first half was as bad as the other 2 games that he'd played up to that point. Didn't have a rhythm, didn't look sure of himself. On top of the offense, was just a complete train wreck and lost on defense, making decisions that I was sitting there like, and we're talking about it amongst ourselves, like, what is he thinking sending a double there? Or what is he thinking on that rotation? Why isn't he communicating? And then about midway through that third quarter, he gets to the line a couple times, sort of just, calms down. He sees a few easy ones go in, and then he just unleashed a barrage on those guys. It just became, this is the Tyrese Maxey show. Everybody just, hold on to my back, get in the backpack. I'm taking you along with me. And all the superlatives we say about him, the tough shot maker, the crazy finishes. He had that one great scoop layup underneath Miles Turner that then he's in his face and talking trash. Started hitting the pull-up threes. I think the most noticeable thing, though, is as that momentum got going as a scorer, as he started to, really assert himself in this game, he was animated, right? Yes. Like that's the most personality in any direction we've seen from him to start this season. And look, I get it. It's easier to be talking trash and super animated in that way when you're feeling good and you're making shots and you're leading your team in a positive direction. But that's what it's going to require from him for 4 quarters every night, especially when Joel Embiid and Paul George are not there. He's the leader of this team. Mm-hmm. He is the guy when they are not here. And frankly, he will be the guy on some nights when he has it rolling and Joel and PG are there and they give him the runway. But that's the type of determination they need from him. Even if he had missed some more shots there, I thought the approach was so much better. I thought he had a much better handle of when to attack the paint, when to pull up for threes. Like he had Miles Turner guessing in coverage as the big, and he had all their guards scrambling to figure out what they were going to do. So incredible second half from him. That's what we've wanted to see from the very beginning. Obviously, asking someone to score 45 points a game is not something we're going to do. But I just think the approach, the demeanor, everything was just so much better from that third quarter onward.
Yeah, he controlled the game for the first time all year. And it was everything. It was attacking the rim. He got to his mid-range spots when that was available. He was making his deep threes for the first time all season. He was playing, finally, some inspired defense. Had a pair of blocks and a steal in the second half. Almost had that third one, which would have tied a career high. But he finally put it together in a way that he hadn't put it together in any of the previous 2 games, and certainly in that first half. And that first half was horrific. He couldn't shoot. His decision-making was terrible. When he got into the paint, he seemed like he was almost paralyzed with indecision. He had that one where he dropped, and the 8-foot pull-up was right there, and he planted his
and then he traveled,
and spun and traveled, and it was just
we were
what
going
was
crazy
going
in the studio.
And his defense was terrible, and he had 4 turnovers at the half, and everything looked like, oh no, this is going to be the most depressing post-game show we've had in quite a while. People in our Discord were yelling at him to, shave his hair or let the braids back out. Everything was on the table.
Bring the twist back.
And he just completely turned it around.
Dump that new girlfriend, change the hair, whatever you got to do. That's right. Everything is on the table at that point.
Right.
But we have not had a tale of 2 halves that severe and that drastic in quite a while, because he looked like he barely knew how to play basketball in that first half, and he completely dominated the game and carried them in a way that they need to with Paul George and Joel Embiid out. And it's just like he hit like one runner in the paint and got fouled once, and then all of a sudden it seemed like the game just turned for him.
That was a lot of anger in the second half, clearly, as Kyle talked about it, and Derek alluded to, when yelling at Miles Turner, smacking the stanchion because of, number one, he's making the basket. Maybe a little bit he felt like he got fouled, but it was more seeing the basketball go through the hoop. And for him, this is the guy that we saw in both last season with no Embiid on the floor. We saw the good Tyrese Maxey where he couldn't really adapt and really adjust to the defense that was thrown at him because the attention was on him. As Derek said in the pregame, he's option 1, 2, and 3, and then there's everybody else. So with him now getting into that rhythm, this was the guy, though, that we saw in that 1, 2, and 3. When it wasn't going poorly, it was going this good. Mm-hmm. And we're talking a Again, just a mirage of different types of shots. The three-pointer was back. The mid-range jumper started to fall. The baseline fadeaways, the scoop shots, high off the glass. He was in a really, really good rhythm. He got into that good place. And again, this was one of those games where not just tonight, but Toronto and even against Milwaukee in the opener, this was what you needed to see. Even if they lost the Milwaukee game, it was just more about being the player that we all have discussed about him this entire offseason of who he is and who he's now going to show himself to be consistently getting better and better year after year. This second half and overtime Maxey for what he did, putting on that display of scoring and shooting. It wasn't even about the shot creation for anybody else. We need him to create for others. He did find Caleb Martin for a couple of buckets here and there, and Eric Gordon maybe for a shot or two, but it was more about him getting back on track and getting this going for Wednesday and then Saturday of next week, and showing the type of basketball player that led them to the win in this second half in overtime for everything that he did tonight. I love seeing him angry. It's not the James Harden part that we talk about where Harden would say, no, I want to see him ticked off. Well, this was probably what he meant, but he needed it to snap out of the funk that he was in from games 1 and 2 to find this one again. And now, not to fast forward to Wednesday, but they have a few days off. They're going to look at the film. He's going to see the things and replay them in his mind itself without even the film, because that's what you do. You just have that recall of what happened, what worked for you in game, after the game. You'll do all of that. And this is probably the kickstart of him, again, until George and Embiid get back on the floor to be this type of player that we expected to see. This was really good to see. It was really good to see that emotion. And most importantly, it was good to see the shots to start to fall from all over the floor.
Yeah, so a couple more things I want to get to. 15 free throws attempted in that game. And, you know, it was padded a little bit at the end of overtime because they're getting in the ball there. But that to me is always a great determiner of, like, how is Tyrese playing? You know, how aggressive is he going to the basket, right? And we discussed earlier in the game, there were probably some calls that were like, might be borderline, and maybe I wouldn't have called it. But he was putting the onus on the officials. Like, I'm going to put my shoulder into Nembhard or Neesmith or Halliburton or whoever it might be, and I'm going to force you to make calls. And so that is always a big thing. I'm a huge, huge believer in the value of free throws. Obviously, scoring points where you're not being guarded is important, but also just to have the mental resets in the middle of a game. They are great run stoppers. It's a big reason, I think, that Joel Embiid has been such a plus-minus king through the years, right? Because other teams will go on runs. He goes down the other end of the floor, and it's like, oh, got you on the rip-through, got you on this. And all that momentum, they're running up and down the floor, just comes to a crashing halt. And so that was a big deal. The other thing, and this circles back to something that Maxey said the other night after the Milwaukee game. He was asked by a reporter something to the effect of, you know, how tough is it to win without Joel Embiid, or like, how are you guys going to manage without him? And Tyrese was upset and was basically like, we cannot worry about how many games Joel misses, because if our mentality is Joel's not in, we're not going to win, our season is going nowhere. Like, there are no excuses. I'm here. We have a lot of good role players. We have a lot of vets. We need to figure out ways to get it done. And I think, you know, moving off of him and more to the whole group, I think you saw that, right? Like, I think we've seen fight from this team. I think you've seen, you know, the compete level has been there. Yeah. I don't think there's been a whole lot of like, oh man, like side-eyeing people and saying like, there's been some bad decision-making. There's been some unfamiliarity in terms of the chemistry. But I think by and large, these guys have looked at this, you know, first 3 games without Paul and Joel and said, well, that doesn't matter. We're going out there. We're going to try to win. We're going to lay it on the line defensively. Maybe there's going to be some stupid stuff done in the meantime. But I think Maxey kind of being that face of determination offensively, that puts wind in the sails of everybody. And I think that leads to being able to gut out a win on the road in a situation like this.
We all silly like the mayor.